I'm sorry.
I'll go move my car to this side. And is this where the adults are as well? Or are they?
Once we do that, we will split the room.
Got it. So it's in here, but over
Yeah.
there.
It all depends on how many youth are online versus how many adults are in the person and online. But we can split this and have one or the other. Whoever eats more food gets this side, and then we move over. Okay. We are waiting around for people to get here. I know some that are just running tardy. So if you're able to, Jane, can we wait like 15 minutes?
Not a problem.
Thank you.
You're welcome. How is the conference going so far?
Oh, I think it's great. I've had many different people that attended yesterday saying that it was great. And so that's awesome when I get feedback from people saying everything's good.
Nice.
I'm pushing food to the people that are here. So
If you feed them, they will come. That is a library motto. For sure.
I like me better a little bit farther away, man. I'm very red today. It's probably like your voice. You see pictures in your bathroom mirror versus other things. And you're like, oh.
Yeah, 100%.
And if I was half as skinny as I was when I thought I was fat, that would probably, I'd be.
Right?
Pamela, anyone on Zoom, she's going to be your host, like when we're in, if you can't hear us, things of that nature, you can either chat with her, talk to her, and then she'll tell me, and then we'll try to fix it. If we, what is it called? Stall, and you can just see when, like the information's not going back and forth. Then she can also DM me and I can fix it. This one's been pretty good. Last year we had internet issues that it would just stall. This one, I had 5.5 hours of straight video last night. I was like, yes.
So, and also if you want to put questions in chat that you'd like me to relay, that happened a little bit yesterday, and that's something that I'll do for you as well.
We also do captions.
Pamela, you have such a baby face.
I actually do have a baby face, but yeah, I understand. That's my granddaughter. That's Marcy May. She's a third generation. Hey Jane, you look great.
Thank you.
She's a third generation gamer girl. See, you ask and you receive. You put it in chat and I'll relay it.
me check my DMs, because I know of someone that. Oh, it's my first.
No, set up reading, I was reading the, how do I say it? What?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, all 24 pages. It was very simple reading, but it was interesting and stuff that I've been thinking about for quite some time, like, why aren't we bringing up the fact that on film, I've got people being dissuaded from coming in and they're using the false truth to not let them come in. Crazy people.
The term Wall Street is such, so, it's such an oxymoron.
I know.
It makes no sense. Wall
Okay,
Street-
how about lies?
Yeah.
How about lies? I'll be correcting you, as I should be. That is a very, very good observation.
Did you get called in last time?
I got called.
You got
I
called
didn't have to go in. Okay. I got called twice.
It's for being preventable, though, I'm not gonna make that.
Third afternoon to the university.
You got- Yeah, I read the. Most of this is, and the new one, and the new one, you just do this.
Oh,
And I'm like, okay, so but the effect that's going to help, it's legal thing, but.
Right.
It's nice. My guess is, because this happened, I think this happened kind of a lot where you have one suit and a counter suit and then it's settled.
the thing is, I'm a lady.
Hmm.
And I think the original suit, I guess she's right. I don't know that they specified it.
Well-
Okay.
You know, when we come, because under the. Within the address. Or some like, some like value that's lost in your energy use. Your items with.
Well,
There's damages that they had. I mean, it was just a publicity stunt, so it's cost, it's like, man,
But the GoFundMe, I think they're almost up to 12,000.
yeah, it was, they hit 12 this morning. They have people donating all night long.
I needed to do that, and I forgot to do that.
we haven't given ours.
The one from the play? Okay. So that'll help too.
Yeah, I think they would.
I don't think it should have
Oh, were they, it's getting.
been. I don't know what they're paying anymore.
Yeah.
It's just, there are. And I talked to. Attorney. They could pay.
Feel like there should be.
But I mean, when you pick an attorney, it's like picking a dog, and you want the right one, come on. I don't know, I've never had to hire an
But
attorney.
there's attorneys across the country that do those kinds of things. but they're also geared to LGBT, like this person not at all.
Well, the thing is, like, sometimes when you're hiring an attorney, you're hiring their network of influence.
He's only been in for a little bit. I'm hoping that, But it's their, and then I talked to that attorney took a city case from Monroe. And I think that's why they are, okay, this is still city. And so like, but he's only had like the one that's only been in since 2022. Is the one that filed originally, and then there's another hour that is doing 18.
You know, well,
She's 2022.
she 2022?
And they all left another law firm. So that's based on all of that. So I'm hoping this whole minor student stuff will get the other side, because the other side is just a person that stupid. Sort of movement.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, we got our organizing. We got some money, but just let this go away. Because I'm like on the board with the little Tennessee case. I know the people that work the Tennessee case, the Florida case, that kind of stuff. But hopefully.
I think just if they lose, like Michelle Ball, they're kind of like, temper them a little bit with what they say.
I do feel that their attorney hasn't looked at it as marketing, which makes me feel better with that. There's a lot of those type of, there's some ones that use it to market to get other cases. And he didn't even talk to, they had to find another law firm to talk about the,
On the news. Yeah.
So. That's a good sign.
But that's why, but that's what they didn't say, like what we were talking about, like he was saying, oh, East Frank is in trouble. Like, we were like,
No, maybe the media tried to find it.
a lot of nuance
A
and
lot of people
technical.
didn't even know history of fairness and stuff.
Yeah.
But it was First Amendment, I mean, it's craziness.
This is like Buffalo versus UF kind of thing. We look Larry Clinton went to court for.
Yes, he went all the way to the Springs on that.
91, didn't
Yeah, and he was there the entire time and he was 12.
he? Yeah. Pretty fascinating story.
There's a whole lot of case law within the porn industry for that kind of stuff. And there's attorneys that just do that.
What if they're really mad about some published stuff, they're just like, I don't understand. Like,
No one believed that they were promoting East Frank.
Yeah, because the phone, the editing was so sloppy. It was
it was
obvious.
supposed to be.
It was a parody.
Yeah.
It was a parody, so. And when Nelson did their thing, there was Jerry Falwell. And Kari, yeah, Elizabeth. It was great.
Is
Yes.
Jerry Falk, is he dead?
Yes.
Okay, I thought maybe he was, I hadn't heard in a while.
He was sort of,
He died during Pride season. Yes, there was that meme going around. It was just something like Jerry Falwell died during Pride, and like everybody at the Simpsons funeral was like laughing. We got one in.
well, why don't we start? We're 15 minutes. And I will say that are they coming right now? Awesome.
Food.
There's food. You have to eat something all afternoon. And our last speaker is ill, so or the second to last speaker, Josh was ill, so we will condense his information. And so Well, thank y'all for coming today. And that we will have the 1 o'clock as the keynote speaker. And Jane and I will talk, go over her bio in just a second. And then we're going to split up between youth, which will be focused with Equality North Carolina, and we'll just have one room, and we might go to another room or split the room. And depending on how many people are on Zoom, we will figure out who gets what computer and that kind of stuff, so that the Zoom people will be able to at least do, if you're adults on Zoom, you will go to one breakout room. And if you are a youth on Zoom, then you can still be part of the Equality North Carolina discussion while being on Zoom. And so we'll figure that out depending on how many people are here at that time. And the Equality North Carolina people are still getting here, so we're not. And then because they have to come all the way from Raleigh. And we had several speakers yesterday all the way from Raleigh. And if you don't know me, I'm Crystal Robinson. Then we will get back together, do the discussion with what Joshua is going to do, or what we can do to help with Union County Pride. He has been ill for several days, and he was like not going to be able to make it. And so let me introduce you to Jane Walters. She, her pronouns, is a board member for Annapolis Pride and former board member and the director of education for Indy Pride. She was the first openly transgender manager in the history of the Indianapolis Public Library. Having worked in libraries for over 14 years, she now works for the Anne Arundel, and if that's completely wrong, please read it in the way that it's supposed to be, County Public Library. Her writing has been featured in Library Journal and Children in Libraries. She has spoken on LGBTQ+ issues for libraries, companies, literature, and on the news. Gave a keynote speaker at the USAP 2024 conference, and that's where I met her, is that we were able to go to the conference this year. And after she spoke, I stalked her and asked her to do this. And she said, yes, thank you. And is a contributing author in the book Trans and Gender Diverse Voices in Libraries that came out 2023. Her passions include LGBTQIA+ representation in juvenile literature, making sure libraries are accessible and equitable for the community, and making them a safe and welcoming environment for all. I'm going to you can see who's out here. Amy, can you move closer to someone else? Does not want to. Okay. Jane, would you like to start speaking?
Yes, thank you for the introduction. And you got it right. It is Anne Arundel.
Oh, yes.
I kept wanting to call it Arundel, but I had Lord of the Rings on my mind. It's an honor to be here by technology, and I'm so sorry I can't be there in person. I'm visiting family and friends I had to leave behind when I moved to Indiana and moved from Indiana to Maryland last year. My family and I decided to move for our own safety, but I am getting a little bit ahead of myself. As Crystal said, my name is Jane Walters, pronouns are she, her. I'm a librarian, and I will not be shushing anyone. I think everybody's on mute anyway, so it wouldn't even matter. I went back to school as an adult to become a librarian. It took me almost 8 years to earn my master's in library and information sciences because I was working at the same time. I've always wanted to be a librarian. I have always wanted to share books and information with the people around me. The cat eye glasses and cardigans were just kind of a bonus. At the same time, There was another lifelong dream that I nurtured that I had never shared with anyone. Not my parents or siblings, not my friends, not even my best friend or my wife. I grew up in a strict Catholic family, attended an evangelical private high school. Even though I eventually crept out of the closet about my bisexuality, I kept another truth deeply buried. I was a woman. I had always been a woman, but that's not how the world saw me. That's not even how I allowed me to see myself, not for a very long time. 8 years ago, when I couldn't hold that secret any longer, when the risk of staying silent finally outweighed the risk of speaking out, I told my wife. I said words I'd never said out loud. I said, I'm transgender. I'm a woman. My wife, and you'll notice I don't say X, she replied in the best way possible. She said, well, good thing for you. I like girls too. Slowly, I shared this news, and it wasn't really news, it was more information about myself with others. First with friends and family, then some trusted coworkers, a few fellow students, and finally at work. I became the first openly transgender employee at the Indianapolis Public Library in 2016. Now, it's important that I say the first openly transgender employee because they'd had them for as long as they'd been around, just none of them had ever been comfortable or it hadn't been safe for them to come out. I still taught my preschool classes at story time. I still got to hold babies. I was allowed the full freedom to simply be who I was. And as community members got to know me, the real me, they warmed to me. I took and I still take my role as a librarian as a privilege to serve. And I admit, I took the initial welcome I got as a transgender woman for granted. My rise to branch manager felt almost like destiny. After all, LGBTQIA plus people have come so far in the last 100 years. Tides had turned, public sentiment was finally on our side. Except for a small group of people, it wasn't. It started small. More book challenges each year, specifically targeting titles by queer and BIPOC authors, and especially queer BIPOC authors. People started protesting drag queen story times. Then quietly, internal changes made me aware of a glass ceiling. I had been a wonderful feel-good story just a few years before, the first openly transgender employee and then branch manager at NDPL. Soon, I could tell I would never get to be anything more than a manager of a small branch, hidden away, if I stayed with them. Then the debates about transgender athletes competing with their own gender popped up. One of those common sense debates that aren't so common if you know the facts. It was about the inherent physical advantages that men have. It was about fairness for women, not something these protesters usually rallied behind. The fact is, transgender women taking gender affirming medication lose all those quote unquote physical advantages that cisgender men have. In a fairly short period of time, child athletes who received puberty blockers, then gender affirming medications, develop exactly the same way their cisgender peers do. These were just kids who wanted to play sports with other kids. They just wanted to play with their friends. But that's not what was on the news every night. Instead, every time a transgender woman beat a cisgender woman at anything, including chess, it ignited the debate. The truth is, science already settled the debate, but people rarely, if ever, heard about it. So good people, thoughtful people, without all the information thought, hey, maybe that's not fair. Once the transgender athlete debate created a wedge, then the next common sense push was against gender affirming surgery for kids. But it wasn't just gender affirming surgery, it was gender affirming care, period. This time the news led with scary stories about kindergartners getting affirming surgery, which doesn't happen, and wondering how dangerous puberty blockers are, which they're not. They've been used to help kids who go through early puberty for decades, even if they aren't transgender. It once again created doubt where there should have been none. As most of you are aware, the majority of the time, especially early on, gender affirming care is merely therapy to help guide the child and the parents through a very personal and profound period in a child's life. After these initiatives succeeded, they targeted queer people in general. Don't say gay laws, more book bans, arguments about pronouns. I know you're probably thinking, Jane, I know, for real, I know, I live in Union County. I'm one of those teens. Right now in 2023, 2024, I know what's happening to queer people around the country, but I don't know if you know what was happening in Berlin, Germany, 100 years ago today. Time is a vast ocean, and our history has frequently been written on the waves. Here today, gone tomorrow. So let me take you back to 1924. Just 6 years after the end of World War I, a small but vibrant queer community rises in the Tiergarten section of Berlin. Though it's technically against the law to be queer, the Weimar government decides it has better things to worry about than them, and people are left to live their lives. An openly gay scientist, Magnus Hirschfeld, conducts his work at the Institute of Sexual Sciences, which he opened in 1919. His goal? To study and understand gender and orientation differences. He was pioneering gender affirming care. Right there in 1924, a scientist is doing research to further our understanding of queerness. You know, 1924 with the flappers and beaded dresses and cigarette holders as long as rulers, jazz on the radio, and everything was the bee's knees. That 1924. That also featured queer clubs and cabarets in Berlin that allowed queer people in Berlin to spend a night out with like-minded friends. But members of a new political party, the Nationalist Party, started its ascent. They started cracking down on queer spaces for the children, they claimed, protect women. They started with book bans, focusing on books by Jewish writers, by communists, by queer people. They turned the police loose on organizations that had operated freely for years. And ultimately, during one of many night raids conducted against people they deemed undesirable, they raided Hirschfeld's Institute and burned all the books and his research. Years of scientific inquiry gone in the night. All of it. The news was full of stories about the predatory men in dresses, loud and unladylike butches that preyed on children, on women. Our art was deemed deviant, our existence legislated once more out of regular life. Soon we were declared too poisonous, too dangerous to live among good people. So they gave us a pink triangle and built camps and ovens. The Holocaust, Shoah, is a genocide that first belongs to the Jewish people. I must acknowledge that everything the Nationalist Party, the Nazi Party, did to our queer family, they designed specifically to destroy the Jewish family first. Every charge levied against queer people echoed the charges writ large against the Jewish peoples. So as we slip from the 20s to the 30s and 40s, please understand and know we cannot separate the anti-Semitism from the Holocaust because the Holocaust was rooted in anti-Semitism. But we can acknowledge that the Holocaust in all its horrors very much happened to queer people too. 6 million Jewish people were murdered during the Holocaust. At least 100,000 gay men were murdered as well. We don't know how many transgender people or queer women perished. those numbers were never strictly kept. They are not simply lost in time's sea. They've sunk beneath it, and we will likely never find them again. Their histories, their stories, are gone forever. Queer spaces still existed, but in hiding. American soldiers coming back from World War II brought back European sensibilities. The White Horse in Oakland, California, the Club Lafayette in New Orleans, Louisiana, both opened officially in 1933. In the aftermath of the war, the American government was more concerned with international politics. Their eye turned away from the lies and lives of propaganda about queer people, and we were once more allowed to flourish in our walled gardens, behind closed doors, in places reserved for and created by ourselves. Our art once again was valued. Our talents once again enjoyed by the public, whether they realized it, and most likely they didn't, or not. Waves in, waves out, a push, a pull. We flowed into the 50s, stepping by slivers into the light. Queer characters appeared in movies and books. Whole categories of pulp novels appeared, featuring queer characters. I mean, sure, they were quote unquote cautionary tales, most of which ended badly, but they were salaciously open about queer relationships. Queer clubs and bars grew stages, and drag queens and kings who had already long performed for the community now took a spotlight. Queer women kept the jobs they'd taken during the war and formed a formidable part of the US government information and secretarial divisions. We enjoyed an unprecedented, if private, freedom until the Cold War crept in, and the irrational fear of communists infiltrating the US and destroying our way of life became a central political issue. The Red Scare ushered in congressional hearings, blacklists, and witch hunts, rooting out people suspected to be communists and separating them from their lives and their communities. The Red Scare struck Hollywood with a particular vengeance because Hollywood didn't just have bohemians and liberals, read communists, it also had openly queer people working in the industry. As with the Holocaust, the Red Scare wasn't explicitly designed with queer people in mind, but queer people got pulled into the machine just the same. If you were queer in Hollywood, you were more likely to be called a communist. And if you were queer in the government, well, welcome to the Lavender Scare. In 1953, President Eisenhower ordered that all queer people be separated from their jobs in the military and the government as a matter of national security. Anyone even suspected of being queer was arrested, interrogated, and most certainly fired. They were outed to their families, which made them outcasts. Between 5,000 and 10,000 queer workers were targeted during the Lavender Scare. But this time, we didn't go so quietly. In 1957, Frank Kameny was fired from the Army Map Service after being investigated and arrested on suspicion of being gay. In turn, Kameny sued the federal government for discrimination. Emboldened by Kameny's public rebellion against the government, gay men openly picketed the White House for the first time, demanding parity under the law. Though Kameny lost his suit, he became a central figure in the gay rights movement, bringing a militant and unsparing style of protest to the community as we slip into the 60s. The push, the pull. Now, coming into the open, queer people bloom, primarily in big cities like New York and San Francisco, but smaller cities boasted their clubs and bars as well. For the first time, spaces openly operated as queer spaces. The queer neighborhoods started to flourish. The counterculture movement of radical acceptance allowed pioneering young queer people to live more in the open and without shame. As the civil rights movement rose, uplifting Black voices and Black experiences, demanding Black parity and justice for all, the gay rights movement rose as well. As they say, a high tide raises all ships. And I want to say, as I've discussed the Holocaust, the Red Scare, and now the Civil Rights era, I've been careful to point out the primary targets of each of these irrational attacks. But now, in this era especially, I want to point out that none of this is exclusionary. All these groups intersect. The lesbian victims of the Holocaust were also primarily Jewish. Queer Black Americans populated the protest and action groups in the Civil Rights era. I never want to give the impression that it is us versus them. We're in this together. And it's important to acknowledge when our struggle is not the central struggle. It's important to understand that Black lesbian feminists fought for the Equal Rights Amendment and for gay rights. Queer people are all nationalities, all genders, all ethnicities, all cultures. So as we marched in Jackson, as Dr. King spoke in Washington, as the struggle to break the chains of slavery that still bound Black people to the past spilled into the streets in protest, queer people were there too. Brave young activists, many teens, decided we no longer met behind locked doors. We would no longer pretend to be roommates and confirmed bachelors and gal pals. In clubs like the Brass Bar in San Francisco and the Stonewall Inn in New York, decided to operate more openly. The push, the pull. The more conservative government, however, had a problem with these establishments because they were both racially and sexually integrated. Raids on bars rose, with the police routinely beating and arresting people for crimes against morality, crimes that had been deliberately written to entrap people in queer spaces. In New York, the Stonewall Inn was regularly raided for violating liquor laws. Of course, it was the city that refused to issue the liquor license in the first place. Another law they liked to cite was the law against cross-dressing. This one targeted drag queens and kings and transgender people specifically. Though queer people were living more openly, the Lavender Scare laws hadn't gone away. When raids happened, most patrons fled as if their lives depended on it, because they did. They knew if they were outed, they would lose their families, jobs, and homes. There would be no recourse and no satisfaction in the courts. But on June 28, 1969, something changed. During yet another raid, police tried to arrest Stormy DeLavry, a biracial butch lesbian who was performing that night. That night, she and a handful of other lesbian patrons weren't having it. Instead of submitting quietly, they rebelled. Stormy escaped the police several times, sustaining a head wound in the process. As they tried to drag her to waiting squad cars, she yelled at the still assembled crowd, "Why are you standing there? Why don't you do something?" In response, the crowd raged from June 28th to July 3rd. Some called it a riot. Some called it a revolution. But what it was, without a doubt, was the turning point in the fight for queer parity. New activist groups sprung from the Stonewall uprisings. We fought in the streets and we fought in the halls of government, bit by bit demanding the rights promised to us in the Constitution. But more than that, we started to shed the shame that had held us hiding for so many years. A year after the Stonewall uprisings, the first gay pride marches sprung up in cities across America, and they were pride marches. They were about standing up, being seen, and casting aside the shame that had been pushed on us by societies that ranged from tolerating us to exterminating us. Those activists dared to shout, "We're here, we're queer, get used to it." The phrase "coming out" slipped into our speech. This push, the pull. Into the 70s, when we started to make some inroads into the government, we overturned laws, allowing queer government workers without security clearance to keep their jobs. We shone brighter than ever in entertainment, with queer characters on weekly soaps and sitcoms, in films, in books. allowed to exist as human characters instead of comic relief. Queer culture started to seep into the culture at large and into the consciousness of the general population. Through it all, we still protested, and we still marched. And finally, we started to run for office. In 1977, Harvey Milk was the first openly gay man elected to serve in the office in California. He didn't ease into the role. He immediately sponsored an anti-discrimination bill, affirming the rights of queer people to equal housing, employment, and public accommodation. The bill passed, and the mayor signed it into law. On the opposing city councilors, one of them, Dan White, in turn assassinated Harvey Milk in 1978, ending his life and political career after only 11 months. Though Milk was a local politician working for a single city in California, his assassination became a rallying point for queer people and queer activists. What happened to Harvey would not happen again. We would run for office and risk it all if we had to, because Harvey had. The push, the pull into the 80s, what should have been a new era of freedom turned dark when young gay men started falling to a new unnamed disease. Because this new disorder was mostly, not entirely, contained within the queer community, conservative politicians and public figures declared it a reckoning. They treated this disease as if it were some kind of divine retribution for queer people advancing themselves into public life. Conservative senators aligned with President Reagan decided on a path of not so benign neglect. They chose simply to ignore it. In response, queer activists formed their own action squads. The gay men's health crisis in New York City took on a role the government should have filled, researching the new gay cancer, as they were calling it, trying to understand how it spread and why it seemed to cluster in queer communities. Public hospitals turned these patients away, and large parts of the lesbian community stepped up to care for the men dying in droves. Civilians had to fight the CDC to get them to acknowledge, to study, and to start researching ways to prevent and cure the disorder now being called acquired immune deficiency syndrome, AIDS. In a strange twist, it was an ally that helped humanize the AIDS crisis. Diana, Princess of Wales, was the first major public figure to visit AIDS patients in hospitals. She held patients' hands and sat with them, spoke with them. This beloved fairy tale figure helped to break through the stigma brought about by this mysteriousness of the illness and the queerness that surrounded it. I'm sorry, I lost some people during this time. Soon, the HIV status of celebrities like Liberace, Rock Hudson, Freddie Mercury, and Magic Johnson were revealed, bringing the crisis into the average American home. The death of Ryan White, a teenage boy with hemophilia, put a sympathetic face on the cause. Eventually, the government and the public sympathies rose for AIDS patients, specifically, and for the queer community in general. The push, the pull. Now that queer people were becoming almost central in the news, public opinions continued to warm. President Clinton became the first candidate for that office to directly address queer issues during his campaign. One of his campaign promises was to end the lavender scare laws for all queer people working in the government and serving in the military. Conservative forces in the House and Senate, not just Republicans, but also centrist liberals, pushed back. Once again, they floated the conspiracy that queer people were predatory, hiding in the military, trying to destroy unit cohesion, the same old excuses trotted out during the Lavender Scare. And it forced a compromise. Don't ask, don't tell. Under the old rules, anyone could be accused of being gay. They could be investigated, and if found to be queer, arrested and fired. Don't ask, don't tell was supposed to allow queer people to serve if they didn't volunteer any information about themselves. So don't tell. In return, the government would stop actively searching for queer people in the service to root them out. Don't ask. In theory, it was a step forward. In practice, it became another tool used to persecute queer people. More people were discharged from the military and from government service under Don't Ask, Don't Tell than were ever terminated under the previous restrictions. At least 13,000 service people were forced out. In contrast, in 1993, Hawaii's Supreme Court ruled that gay marriage would probably be protected by constitutional rights. This was a huge step forward in parity and equity, now that queer families revealed themselves in communities everywhere. Suddenly, gay couples and queer people were advancing by the day. This was the area that preached tolerance for the queer community, the era in which queer people finally became part of the mainstream. But it wasn't a seamless shift. The push, the pull. In 1996, conservative members of both parties passed the Defense of Marriage Act, or DOMA. It was a preemptive federal ban on marriage equality, intended to stop that progress in its tracks. Anti-queer sentiment was on the rise, and our rights still weren't protected by national or local laws. Although individual acts of anti-queer violence have pervaded American history, the murder of Matthew Shepard in 1998 became a polarizing moment in queer American history. Until this point, defendants routinely used a legal defense maneuver called the gay panic defense. Rooted in transphobia and homophobia, the gay panic defense asserted that a reasonable, read straight, person might panic and be in fear of their lives if approached by a queer person. The defendants usually asserted that they had been propositioned by the victim, and because of their queerness, the defendant felt that they had to defend themselves to the death. It painted all queer people as predators, and it was a defense regularly used successfully to justify anti-queer violence and homicide. Matthew Shepard, a college student from Wyoming, was tortured, beaten, and ultimately murdered by two young men who claimed Shepard had hit on them at a bar. In a first, the judge assigned to the case threw out the gay panic defense, and the defendants were both convicted of the crime. From this dark moment in queer history rose hate crime laws. These made it a crime to commit violence or terror against a member of a particular group because the victim was a member of that group. It also affected change in that the gay panic defense is now prohibited in 17 states and Washington, D.C. Sadly, it's only prohibited in 17 states and Washington, D.C., not the entire country. The terrible cruelty and injustice seen in this particular murder further moved the needle toward not just tolerance, but acceptance of queer people in America. The push, the pull. Bit by bit, public perception of queer people improved. As the percentage of acceptance rose over 60% in the early aughts, individual Supreme Court challenges led queer activists towards the goal of marriage equality. In 2004, Massachusetts legalized marriage equality, the first state to do so in the U.S. This provoked conservative activists and members of the government to push back. They fought vehemently, passing more and more anti-queer laws in some states. while others expanded the number of legal states day by day. Conservative activists successfully toppled California Proposition 8, which in turn polarized equality activists to harden their resolve. Case after case hit the United States Supreme Court. By 2014, marriage equality was the law of the land in 70% of the country. Ultimately, in 2015, the Supreme Court struck down federal rules prohibiting marriage equality, and the US became the 17th country to legalize marriage equality. The backlash against the advances in marriage equality and against the growing common sentiment supporting queer equality led us directly to today's Don't Say Gay laws. The push, the pull. The ocean falls open, and it falls again with the new book bans and aversion to science and attacks on transgender people. Just as the Nationalist Party started by attacking the science and research of Hirschfeld's Institute, just as they burned and banned books by and about undesirable people, just like the US government refused to look at both sides of the story with the AIDS crisis. Our past, our present, and our future are all alive on the currents. They echo, they frighten, but they can inspire. Our government is singling out transgender people because they're the smallest of a small group, the vulnerable to common sense arguments that are only common sense because not enough people know transgender people. And we know because we've seen this tide come in and go out for the last 100 years. And even as the floods come, they also go. Those that survive lead us to more progress. Which brings us to now, to this day in Union County with all of you here. I know a lot has been happening, a lot in your town, a lot in your world, and I'm not going to lie. It's scary. I'm scared, and I don't blame you for being scared. But I also want you to look at me and realize we have also come so far. Never in my life did I believe marriage equality would even be discussed, let alone enshrined in federal law. Never did I think I would get to live my life out loud. At your age, I couldn't have imagined that one day I would have a wife and family, a job I love, pink hair, cat's eye glasses, and all the cardigans I can afford. I also never imagined that I would be allowed to stand here in front of you and tell you a few things I could have stood to hear when I was your age. I want you to know that you are beautiful. Some of you are already out and surrounded by people who love you, and that is phenomenal. Some of you are still waiting to come out until it's safe, because it might not be safe at home or in your community, and that's okay too. No matter where you are in your personal journey, you are still valid and worthwhile. I also want you to know that you are powerful. Although I'm so glad we have queer adults that you can meet and know, please remember, your queer elders were your age or a little older when they started the fight for our rights. Your passion, your strength, your united voices are the next push and pull in this sea that we share. You have the power to vote, to register others. You have the power to run for office the moment you turn 18. You are powerful. And I want you to know you're not alone. Look around. Think about how hard Union County is fighting to celebrate Pride. Think about all the organizations there are now to help you. Think about those teachers who wear their pronoun pins or put pride flags on their notebooks so you know who is safe. Think about your library that wants desperately to welcome you in spite of the government. Finally, I want you to know we will endure. And I can tell you that with an absolute certainty, because I know our history. Yes, we have struggled, and no, our struggle is not yet over. But every time there's a push, we pull, and we pull back harder each time. 100 years ago, we satisfied ourselves knowing that no one noticed us. And then we were satisfied that people simply knew we existed. And then we were satisfied to be tolerated. And then we were satisfied to be accepted. The push, the pull, the next step is harmony. When we're celebrated as part of the beautiful variety of people that fill this beautiful world, it will happen because we will make it happen. My beautiful friends, I'm a librarian, and it has been a pleasure to share all this information with you, all of our history that we will keep this time because it doesn't belong to me now. It belongs to you. But I promise you're not alone. We feel the push. Let's pull together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane. And any questions online?
Thank you very much, Jane. If you are online and you want to put your questions into the chat, we'll relay them. Crystal can see them now. Chloe says that was beautiful. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you so much, Chloe. This has really been honestly an honor and a privilege to be able to get to speak to you and to share this history.
I remember, when, Princess Diana really brought the AIDS, crisis to the forefront, for everyone. I remember just how things started to shift, and I grew up in the 80s, and that was a really hard time. And yeah, thank you for all of the research that you did to really put all of these things in an origin story. And it just goes to show you that the story we tell about ourselves to ourselves matter. And my big thing is, like Aristotle, if we don't tell our stories, then someone else will. And thank you for telling the other story, because I don't feel like people know this as much as they need to. And we need to tell our stories so people can see the other side.
That is so true. We really, really do. I don't know how many people I have met that have never even heard of Harvey Milk that are in our community.
Yeah.
And he was such a pivotal point for us. And the thing is that they don't want to teach this history because then we'll see the cycle. We can see that they're going by the same playbook that they've used for 100 years.
Bottom line is we got to start talking. All of us have to start talking and telling our story.
And yesterday we had Vive Healthcare, and she explained how the Union County Health Department is not even allowing PrEP to be issued through the county program, and hopefully some other organization, and maybe we could do something like that if we could get, they have grants, so let's see if they'll because we had the AIDS crisis, but we still have people being diagnosed, and also about 13,000 die every year with complications of AIDS. So it's not like it's over. And that, but if you see the difference between, there's like that mid-90s where it was like before then, anytime you were diagnosed, it was like all my family and my husband's family who died of AIDS was like right before the
the cocktails. And then I have friends now that are like on their second husband and they died, and they're you know, like they were, and even one that was able to legally marry had to bury their spouse because of COVID, and he survived COVID even though that he had, you know, he has AIDS or because HIV in him. And that to see that you're able to grow old and maybe he'll die of a heart attack, that kind of stuff is much better than having, I know at least 2 people that are on the quilt. If you don't know what the quilt is, it was a quilt that I think it was Brian White that they started doing that because he was a little white boy. And that both of the individuals who are on the quilt, their families sort of wiped out all of their history of who they really were. One, he was a valedictorian of the school. He lived in San Francisco. His partner was actually the kid of the professor of Gilligan's Island. And I was young, so that was the thing, like, oh wow, still the professor's here. And his son went on to do a lot of because he had to run off from Texas to San Francisco in the 80s to be able to survive. And so his partner went on and did a lot of community building in San Francisco on the AIDS crisis. And that he passed away like just a couple of years before the cocktail thing, which is really sad. And then my husband's uncle. And if you ask me anything about his uncle, his family, if it wasn't for my husband, no one would have known that he partnered, that they fought for all his housing and everything that him and his partner, which would have probably been his spouse at this time, acquired during that time. They fought for all the votes. His parents fought for it, and he had a kid. It's like it was, but they were like, every once in a while they'll say something like, "Oh, if my spouse had not have told me, I would have known that that was a microaggression of this life." And so being able to go to people's weddings and things like that. So, oh, and then the Dan White, if you ever hear about the Twinkie defense, that was his defense of why he killed Harvey Milk, is that supposedly he was eating junk food.
Yeah, he was eating too much sugar and it made him crazy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like I was his defense, like I'm eating way too much sugar. I was eating Twinkies and all sorts of stuff, and I just slipped out. It is. Yeah,
It's almost worse. Oh my God, that's what they gave her.
so, if there's nothing, we will, no other, statement.
Someone put a question in the chat.
Oh, sorry.
I see the question. Thank you.
Jane, while you're thinking about this, let me go ahead and read the question for everybody in the room.
Okay.
Do
We
you
have it
feel,
up on
if you
screen.
feel comfortable, could you tell us about your friends who you lost to AIDS? Any little stories or anecdotes? They seem to mean a lot to you, and I'd love to hear their stories if you're comfortable with that, of course.
The one that just always jumps to mind immediately is Samuel. he had been thrown out of his house, moved in with his boyfriend. They lived in an apartment complex. Um, he was diagnosed with AIDS, and there was just so there was so little known in ways. Um, but it was like he essentially was confined to his apartment because any little cough, cold, anything could potentially kill him. Um, and so my best friend Yvette and I would go over occasionally, and um, it would be late at night when everybody else in the apartment complex is pretty much asleep, and that is when we would go down to the rec room they had there so he could play pool because he couldn't be down there when anybody else was down there. And it just to just to see somebody that was barely 18. When I talk about the AIDS crisis, I get both angry and sad because of that neglect that caused people to needlessly die. And that's, you see that same sort of just malice now with everything else. But yeah, he was amazing. Prettiest eyes.
Thank you for sharing and bringing his memory to life and honoring him. It's hard for people, the younger people, and this is not you're young, I'm not trying to dismiss youth. It just, you weren't there seeing people leave all around you and being worried about your friends who were gay, because you didn't know, they didn't know. There was very little done to not only treat it, but to how to prevent it. And it was pretty scary, and it was traumatic for our generation. So thank you for shedding light on that.
I will say real quick though, in comparison to the AIDS epidemic, I'm in the mental health field. That's my passion, lies in mental health. And we are losing people at an astounding rate by suicide. And I think that the youth have a whole lot to say about that. Because
I agree.
They're seeing people die by it's the second leading cause of death in kids 10 to 24. And in the LGBTQ plus community, they're 46 times more likely to attempt. So that's something that we all need to take seriously.
To tap on what you just said, I'm very active in disabilities issues, and the intersectionality of disability in all populations is clear, but within the LGBTQIA plus community, the mental illness part of the disabilities issues is something that I really would like to bring to light more. So thank you for bringing that up and saying that, because we do need to understand the intersectionality. I know a lot of people who are in the community who are also disabled because of the impairment of their mental illness. So we need to figure out ways to bring to make this inclusive. Does that make sense? To make these things inclusive to everyone else, we know, but to everyone else, to bring them up, not as separate issues. but holistically.
I'm sorry, it was interesting to see that. Okay, so that I'm 18 now.
Thank you for sharing that with us. I am 18 now, and my family didn't really know anyone who was affected by AIDS. So I love to hear the stories of those who we've lost.
I can say
I would
that
love to.
high school in 1982.
Can you hear him? Okay.
Yeah, no, Jane, I'm happy to hear you bring that up because I graduated high school in 1982. And
You need to come up
So-
here.
as a young man,
I can hear.
I'm sorry.
okay, so yeah, as a young man at the time, when you at that age, I can speak for myself, and you feel invincible. You don't think anything's going to happen. And so far, for the first several years of the AIDS crisis, it was mostly older gay men. When you're 18, 19, 20, someone who's 50 seems like they're ancient. As a 59-year-old, I feel ancient now. But I will tell you that I lost many, many friends. And I started to watch it go from what was at the time the senior community and start working its way down. And when it got to be people my age at that time, like when I was turning 24, 25, then it became very real. And another thing that I love that you brought up was the don't ask, don't tell, because my out, it was like a self-preservation to get, I didn't want to get AIDS, and I was starting to watch my close friends die. So I decided to become a nurse, but I did that by joining the Air Force. It didn't want me either, because that was even before don't ask, don't tell. And then they passed don't ask, don't tell while I was still in the service. Right when I graduated nursing school, they sent me to the Middle East. I graduated right at that time. So anyways, I'm glad to hear you bring up those things, because it's kind of a trip down memory lane a little bit for me, as painful as it can be. Because I remember calling my mother, and it was like my 20th funeral, and she said, stop going. So, yeah. And those were close friends and just some acquaintances or partners of friends. So it was mind-blowing. And then to go into nursing and then come out. I remember when they don't ask, don't tell. And I want to say it was, you probably know the year, I think it was 92 or 3.
Yeah, early 90s. Yeah.
Yeah. And I will tell you what's one other thing, and then I'll shut up. The don't ask, don't tell. When I looked around as a gay man, and I was in the flight nurse corps, we flew into places and brought soldiers back who were wounded. They went after women constantly, and especially
Yes.
enlisted women.
Yes.
That literally created a witch hunt against our female counterparts. And I
Mhm.
wasn't even really trying to hide who I was by then. I was just being myself. You couldn't talk about it. You couldn't say where you went to the bar last night, and that constant not bringing your authentic self, because when you can't say what you did, when everyone's talking the next day, what'd you do over the weekend? You had to just keep your mouth shut, because any clue that any bomb that you might drop, they'd get you like that. But I just want to say I don't know if you've seen much or followed up much about women being persecuted. I think everyone knows that. I think in the
Well, and
military.
it was, the women in the service were in a way allowed to be more their authentic self, because people would expect you join the service, maybe you do. So everybody knew who was a gay woman, who was a lesbian. I'm a military brat, and I was a military family member and a military civilian team member. So this was my culture I was raised in, and we all knew who was a lesbian. It was not that big of a deal, but yeah, it did give them that right, that not really right, but that impetus to go after the pretty much openly gay females in the service.
Yeah.
You and I
Yeah,
need
my-
to talk. I graduated 82 as well. My dad was medical
Okay.
editor.
Do you have anything else you need?
No, I just wanted to say thank you for bringing those things up, because I think it does emphasize the point. When I saw, like, is it Chloe put on there that I'm 18 and my parents don't know anyone who was affected by AIDS, it just kind of like, I went, that gave me some mark veins.
Oh, so it was February 94, but 92 to 94 was just.
Yeah.
I don't know, that's a little-
Yeah.
they all
I
got
just
together.
real quick, my wife was actually ejected from the military because of don't ask, don't tell.
Sorry, Jane.
That's it. That was just the sign of the times then. And she also she had a cousin, Richard, who was living in LA, and he was a hairdresser and an artist, and he was starting to break through when Madonna bought one of his pieces. But Richard never told his family he was sick, and they didn't find out until he died that he had AIDS, and he was only 30.
Wow.
Yeah, I knew a lot of people that also got kicked out because of Don't Ask, Don't Tell.
You know, and
All of a sudden their security clearances, they never happened, or like some other, they'd make up
and
some nonsense.
I worked at a call center. I was struggling into, having a much higher level job, and now I'm at a call center, and I worked with a guy who was a colonel who got kicked out because Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and he lost all of his, and he's working at a call center, and he was a colonel. Anyone, if you don't, colonel is just under general. And he lost all of his retirement, everything that he was close to retirement, everything he worked for in his military service. But I do have to say that as horrible as Don't Ask, Don't Tell is, I'm not in any way saying that it was a good thing. Prior to that, people were court-martialed, and they were, it was horrible. You were sent to Leavenworth and such if they found out. So the military is now hopefully in a better position, because things were finally starting to really turn around when I moved here and got away from the military culture. But that's the other side is already attacking that, saying, oh, the military is learning, we got to quit teaching woke soldiers. And so
Right.
that's not done. That's not a done battle.
No,
Without, unless someone else, Jane, do you need to say anything?
no, that's just, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Keep fighting, especially especially to the kids. Keep fighting, run for office. It's like I can't tell you to walk out of school, but I can tell you that there have been walkouts organized by students to protest book bans and don't say gay laws and all sorts of other stuff that's happening in schools. You guys have power. You guys have a lot of power. But I didn't tell you to walk out of school. Have a wonderful rest of your conference. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
What I'm going to say is, on the same information that y'all did, is some caveats. Is that if you do have people that are in the military, even though that they don't have the Don't Ask, Don't Tell, they have whatever they have their names now, they get a lot of people on the morality issue, especially if you are bi, pan, or poly. And so if they get kicked out, please be nice to them still, because it's the same darn thing, just they wrapped it up again. And but there are organizations that help people fight that, because they can actually get sent to the brig still on those types of things, because they have the adultery clause still. And even though that everyone in the relationship is, especially married, people are accepting that and they are doing that, they're like, oh no, we still don't like it in the military.
Yep,
And
it's a thing.
and that also, if you are an individual, even if you're in a relationship and stuff, talk to your medical people on PrEP, because that is and it's across the board of, individuals can use that to help prevent. And I have a kid that I'm now his mom, and his mom sucks ass. And, so, and I've known him since he was named Skills. And, he's a Ringo. And now he's 30. And he was a prep, spokesperson. He got into a relationship. He, put down his guard. And, before 30, he was diagnosed with HIV. And, but he's, on, the antivirals, and he is, he's a bartender and does all sorts of, things out in the world and doing just great. And it was just interesting to see, from, the 90s, the mid 2000s, and what is going on now in the 2020s, of catching myself up, because when he said, "Hey, I got this," I was like, "Holy shit." And it's still scary. And if you had a kid that had pneumonia while you had it, anything like that, you're still gonna worry about it. But and I mean, he was like actually like on prep commercials and stuff. And I was like, "So what happened?" And he's like, "Well, I tested a person, and they were in a relationship, and that person did not prevent themselves from in their relationships other than, and brought it back into their relationship." And so don't ever put your eye on your guard. You don't know who you trust, but I have trust issues. That's all. So I will let's do a 10-minute break so that we can break up. We have, I see possibly one person online who is a youth. And then we have 2 people here, 3 people here. And so let's see if we can split this up. And then youth, which side do y'all want to be in? This side with food? You keep eating, okay? Just keep eating. And then the adults can go over here. Okay.
Thank you. Have a wonderful rest of your conference.
Jane, I wanted to say,
Yes.
I just realized when you started talking about Indiana and Indianapolis, I realized that almost every friend I have in Indianapolis is gay.
All the best people are.
Of course, that's why they're my friends. Thank you, Jane.
You're welcome. Take care.
You too. Thank you for your very thoughtful questions, Chloe. I really want to know the person, Crystal, who was in the Air Force, because he probably knows somebody I know.
That was me.
Hi, I'm Pam.
Hey, I have a question. Since we have the missing one, if we did 2 and 2, 2 hours for and do it all together, we can do the equality in North Carolina all together, and then do the mental health all together. Are y'all okay with the youth being together with your adult people?
The
Y'all
mental health, it's QPR, suicide prevention training. There's some specifically for youth, but I can do it both adults and youth. It's the same information, so it might be helpful for everyone.
Would y'all be okay to do that?
I think my I wanted to stop her.
Okay, you can do first, and then we don't have the 4 o'clock. So we can do 2 to 4, and hers is 4 to 5 and a half. There's only 9 minutes.
instead of splitting it up, and then everyone could just do the same thing. Okay.
Like,
Yes. Okay, so it's yours.
also, you'll have to keep it about.
Oh, wow.
What's her secretly thing with all?
Yeah. We have an admin here that's, yeah, hey, Tria, man, I'm like,
Knows what's going on.
yeah.
If y'all didn't know, we were just gonna combine them together. So we don't have to really. Choop, choop. And y'all can move this around. Brennan's.
A slide deck on yours? Okay, good, because I have a Mac, I'm not sure. I have a clicker.
Awesome. But Brennan will do the first.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you sent it to me, I think.
He said hi, but I didn't see it. I didn't get his name. The nurse, Crystal,
Eddie.
Eddie.
Yes.
I played Columbia, so there you go.
That's what I was going. Like, I wonder if you play saxophone. That was my nickname in high school from many of my, I didn't realize that being in band, ROTC, drama, were all the nerds, geeks, and freaks
Well,
until I was like, oh, that's just who I am. Okay.
and I played D&D. Everybody knew we were freaks, but they thought that we were like not sexually active and that we didn't have, yeah.
That's one thing about the in the shadows, we're in the shadows, the vampire
Yeah.
show. That really pisses me off when they're like, oh, we're trying to get virgins, and they go to the D&D, and I'm like going, I don't think you got to the right place, but just probably that's the only statement that we're going to make right now because of we've got some youth here.
Well, D&D is all about role playing and for us to figure out who we are too. That was part of it.
Sort of like SCA. It was like,
Oh my God, SCA.
and you know, like that should just have really like, okay, what groups were you together? And then they did, the psychiatrist would be like, yeah, you're autistic. Well, I don't need to do any testing.
They really should. You know, and here I am, like, 59 years old, going like, I've never been diagnosed, but I'm pretty sure. And people are like, well, are you sure you're just not? And I'm like, no, I know how hard it was for me. I know how many jobs I've lost. I know how, yeah.
Oh no, we're putting them all together. You're going to be the Equality North Carolina and the suicide prevention all together.
Thank you
We'll
for
be
this
done by 5:30.
big time. The suicide prevention is huge.
Sticking stuff. There.
Is Eddie in the room?
And
Do you remember a name of Edward McAfee?
that does not ring a bell.
My dad retired a chief working for the Surgeon General of the Air Force, so he did medical admin. So if you weren't admin, you probably wouldn't see him. But the guy that I knew that flew with you, that he wasn't a nurse, he was enlisted, was Andrew Bottom.
Where was he based out of?
Gosh, he's Aerovac like you. So he did some time in Germany, did some time in Congo.
So he was That sounds
is
like
fine.
he was probably on the Atlantic side. I flew the Pacific Rim when I wasn't being activated. So I flew like from Texas over to California and then all the way up to Alaska and then down to Yokota, Japan and Osan, Korea, then back down to the South Pacific and then over to Panama and then back up to Texas. So
I don't know if he did anything in, I know he went TDY and was, did some in the Pacific, but I don't know if he was ever stationed like at Guam or, in the Pacific.
If you want to stand.
So were you
Or if you
Out
want
of
to
San Antonio?
That's fine.
yes,
And it's a
at March
touch
Air Force
screen.
Base was my home base, but all
So
of my
if
training
your
flight to
slides
Texas to
need
do
to
it there.
have the this change.
Yeah, I was
And I
at,
was-
Or
So you-
here.
I started
remove
at
it,
Norton,
and
which
then
was in San
the
Bernardino,
easiest way
California. I
is
went
to
out there.
do it that
Then they closed Norton
Don't know
and
why
moved
you
us all over to
didn't
March. And then from there, I would fly back and forth to
do
Texas and
other
sometimes to
things.
Las Vegas. I think that was Dallas there.
I know
But, yeah.
Norton. My dad was stationed at Norton. We were at
Yeah.
George and then Norton, and then my dad got stationed in St. Olin. So
Yeah.
you and I need to talk offline so we're not taking
Yeah,
everybody else's.
absolutely. Yeah, great.
We'll just point it back towards.
Nice seeing you, Eddie.
I mean, I can do it. What we
I
did.
don't know if I'm gonna.
Okay. Because what we did last time is like, do it like right here. And so people could wander back and forth, but if you just want the audience, that's fine too. I'm gonna. Do. That's why we didn't have captions. I was like, I lost the captions. And that's really how I'm in the room and I'm looking at you and that's what I still read.
I know, it's nice to have like live.
I do that at home. I watch TV with the captions. And it's the best thing of, there's a lot of things that TikTok and the pandemic has helped. Sorry? Yes. And I wish that all the classes, like if it's online, like we didn't have online ones, even with my college life. I graduated right before any of the online, like we had Skype, but Skype was like. Yeah. What did you just say?
Yeah.
Are you wanting a hamburger with that? And but if I had online classes now and having the captions, I think everything should, it's like, just give me the paperwork and I'll read it. Like, I don't like YouTube without captions or anything like that. Okay, let's get back to. Is everyone online, ready to go? We are here with
Chloe
Yeah.
wanted to say hi to Brennan.
Oh, Chloe is on. Brennan Lewis. They are, they them pronouns. They are the Education Policy Associate with Equality North Carolina. They joined in June 2022. Previously, they served as the regional manager of the US and Canada at Peace First, a global nonprofit that coaches and funds young people to create social action projects. We work with Peace First, Equality North Carolina, and is founder of a Raleigh-based LGBTQ youth group, Queer NC. Brandon is dedicated to mobilizing young people to lead change both in North Carolina and globally. They envision helping to build a North Carolina that elevates the voices, work, and lives of LGBTQ youth. They currently live and work in Durham, North Carolina, and along with their rescue pup, Big.
Awesome. Well, I'm super excited to be here with y'all and be joined by some folks online. Yeah, I think for the online folks, it's a little, I don't have the chat up right now. So if you want to say something to the bigger group, just hop on mic and that way we can still be sure to hear you and make sure you have a chance to participate. Sweet. So, as Crystal mentioned, I work for Equality North Carolina. My job primarily focuses on working with youth and young people, and we do a lot of work around schools and engaging with young people around sort of figuring out, like, you know, what are the things that you care about in your community and how do we take action to address them either within school systems or outside. And yeah, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what's happening in school systems right now. I'm actually really interested in hearing more about y'all's experiences. So if at any point y'all are like, let's scratch this presentation, it doesn't sort of fit with where we are, we totally can. I just want to do something that it feels helpful to y'all. Cool. Sorry, just figuring out this touchscreen. So I want to pass it over to folks in the space and ask just sort of an open-ended question of what is bringing you here into this space? What are you hoping to learn and sort of get out of this? Yeah, so feel free to just jump in, or we can go around.
Okay, I got to go first.
And maybe can you say your name and your question?
Thank you. Learned about this with Crystal because I'm helping her with her campaign. But I just kind of want to figure out where I can hold. How do I do that without, you know, getting arrested, hopefully. The problem is my parents, it's not me not wanting to get arrested, my parents not wanting to be able to now. Like that is the issue.
I'm away from my teacher and I was sent a text about 2 days ago if I could drive someone here, so I did. But I'm actually interested in hearing about more of the suicide prevention stuff. Sorry, do you have anything?
Yeah, can folks hear the people sharing? Yeah. Okay, I think it's still on. We could go through folks in the room and if people who are on Zoom have responses, they can jump in as well.
Can I share, Chloe? Chloe says that they're trying to insert themselves into as many queer spaces as possible so they can do the work that needs to be done and help other queer people.
All righty, thank you.
My name is Virgil. I go by they, them.
Why are you here?
I want to learn more about like the history and the community and like weird stuff.
Sweet, hopefully. Can I talk to you about? Oh, I'm Monica, I'm Virgil's mother, and I'm here committee on Income Pride board, and so just been I've just been one of those people my whole life who had LGBT friends and just don't understand why anybody has a problem with it. What's the big deal, you know? And then I had a kid who's it, you know, and so it's just kind of like, yeah, to me it's like a obvious that I would kind of help in this area.
I'm Eddie, and my pronouns are he, him. And I'm on the board.
I just don't get she her, sorry.
Okay.
Grab
Um,
Yeah.
No, I'm glad that we're kind of combining the groups because well, I want to sound like my whole life is lost. My whole life is great. I have a great life. But I did experience a lot of people that I know when I was younger, who committed suicide or attempted. And it's interesting to me that because I came out of that era where everything was just so oppressed. It's like if you were anything but straight, it was so oppressed that I knew a lot of people then. So it's kind of mind blowing to me now because for me, in my experience, I look back and go, oh gosh, I have so much freedom now that I didn't have. And then to hear 46% rate, I've been hearing that lately repeatedly, is just blowing my mind. And it's, I'd like to try to understand. The nurse part of me wants to take care of everything. The other part of me that's an older gay adult says, how can I help stop this for the queer youth that are, it's just unacceptable to me.
With the quality of Carolina is trying to focus on what we can do with the youth here. And especially with all the legal term suffering. Public school and other levels of government.
It was interesting, I'll show that to this. I did a principal for a day with an organization with Atrium Health. We sent folks out in conjunction with other big organizations, HEI. So I ended up at Monroe Middle School, which was exciting for me. But there was this thought in the back of my mind. I saw kids that I felt probably had a queer identity, and yet being in Monroe Middle School, I'm like, I can't even. I wanted to ask. I felt really just like my hands were tied and there was tape over my mouth because I wanted one of the questions. We sat down for an hour with just question and answer with other teachers and the vice principal and the principal, and they said we can talk about anything you want. And I'm like, I don't really feel like you can. So I kind of left that one out, but yet it was like I had several questions I wanted to find out about when we talked about being underserved. We talked about a whole bunch of things, but never did LGBT plus kids.
Did you not bring that up?
I wanted to, and I gotta say that I kicked myself down because I had this little bit of fear in my mind because I didn't know
how that would. It definitely left.
correct. And I didn't know I could
make it worse for them in some way.
Yeah. And I think that the old nurse in me, like, can really sense and read a room. It's pretty, an insight that I've learned. I couldn't read that room. It was really, I just didn't know. I'm like, can I?
You're trained to be the person that's in the middle and doesn't take either side. So you're supposed to not. That's the problem.
It works. They trained them well.
Feeling now.
Here, so we deal with each individual kid separately, and this is what the teachers have told me. And we just they don't have a lot of different thoughts. It's not a geared to giving them person pipeline, school person pipeline, or to a career for those groups. When we know high school, there's not really like there's a DECA, there's those kinds of things that we look at Wellington. They have like D&D, bakery, quilting, 25, 30 different clubs in this part of the county, and then you go to Monroe or Forest Hills, and it's only art, DECA, some sort of, and the Christian sports person, or that is the Christian soldier. Did you do this?
I will tell you, we all kind of have names for each individual schools. And like everyone has a reputation. And almost every BIPOC kid in the entire meeting have first floor sales BIPOC. You will Weddington, Cup person. Like all of those are very, very, very close. Like I went to Weddington Middle. I go to the early college camp. There were 3 Black kids, and that's all of them. So like, it's pretty insane how different those schools are just based off of who they serve.
Yeah.
And
Monroe used to be its own school district. So they actually had Union County and Queens of the White. And the Monroe School District was the individuals who were not living in the county to be. Monroe.
And I can tell you just having been there, it's still that way.
And the one that's between them, there's three that are keys, and I get Parkwood, Porter Ridge, and Parkview or whatever.
Piedmont.
Is the Piedmont the one that's between, there's above the high school, above the highway.
I think
And
maybe
Unionville.
I think Parkwood, Porter Ridge, and then Piedmont's for all. Country bumpkin, yeah.
Okay, that's the.
Yeah. Way up.
Yeah. There is only like 29. All super white, and it's like, you got Forest Hill, the white, farming, and Monroe. And I'm like, I will say, school that I'm in is 49. I thought that would be these areas rural.
Piedmont is known for having kids when they have shotguns in the back of their truck. Just like you will walk into the like literally we call them the country bumpkins that carry the fence. Like that.
I wanna, you wanna jump in and then I'll bring us back a little bit, yeah.
I actually go to the art school in Charlotte, Northwest School of the Arts. And I feel like this is the exact opposite of everybody that's describing their college or middle school, high school or middle school right now. Because my school has gotten so diverse to the point where we don't even need a GSA. Because once you walk in there, you are surrounded by queers, you're surrounded by people of color, you're surrounded by like
There's
just
pretty painted on the wall.
there's a
of the school.
painted on the wall of my school. Like, it's not even that. It's right, it just waits on our, just the waits for them. We had sports, those sports that we had a dragon, but we're in our school and we don't have one. But that's
But you also live in Charlotte. That's
it's also at night.
Yeah.
So people from
You have to
everywhere
choose to go there.
There's a teacher that drives 2 hours to school. It's crazy.
Yeah, I appreciate y'all giving like a little bit of a snapshot of the different schools and the community. We'll have some time to dive in a little bit more in terms of like what y'all on the ground. I do want to pause and see for other three folks want to. Yeah.
I'm Kara, from the see her. I really want to find ways to help the younger people like lead and advocate for themselves, because they're gonna end up being the best advocates for themselves.
My name's Grace and my plans are Daybell, and I just try to come to everything that Union County Pride does because I know they have a lot of haters. And so I just want to be supportive and be here, whether it applies to me or not. And then plus I work with you. So,
Thank you. Do you want to go as well?
I know
you're presenting, but.
My name's Amy. She, her. I was invited by Crystal, and I'm so excited that I am. This is a group that I would love to know more about, and to be quite honest, I'm a little ignorant about. So I really enjoy being here, listening and getting all of the language is so important. And I think learning the language is really important.
Sweet, thank you. I think there's a lot of different perspectives in the room too, which is pretty exciting in terms of anybody online who wants to jump in. I think we only have 2 other folks on. I will take that as a no, but if you do, feel free to drop stuff in the chat, and happy to engage throughout. So just a quick overview of Equality North Carolina. We are the oldest statewide organization dedicated to LGBT rights. We were founded, I believe, in the 70s. And a big part of the work that we do is trying to look at North Carolina as a whole for a more equitable world, particularly the world of North Carolina, for all marginalized people. And my specific lens that I come to this work is within education policy. So we'll see how much of this we get through today, but really what I want to talk a little bit about is sort of the moment that we're in right now, both in North Carolina and nationally, as pertaining to LGBT rights, how that impacts young people. We'll talk a little bit about the legislative climate, touch a little bit on mental health and well-being as it pertains to LGBT youth, and start to think about what are the things that we can actually do. So talking about the ways that we visualize ourselves as part of this world and part of this journey, and how we support each other. And if we have time, we can talk more about SB 49, but I'm also happy to sort of pivot to what folks are interested in. So as we know, a lot of us are coming from different places and sort of different levels of experience with some of these topics. And I want to ask folks to replace judgment with curiosity. This is a good way to move through life. Consider the learning of everybody in the space. Know that we're at different places. Do your best and show up fully. A big one that we like to talk about is sharing the mic, or you might have heard that referred to as step up, step back. So if you find yourself as a person who jumps in a lot, think about ways you might be able to step back to give space for other folks. If you find yourself to be really quiet, maybe a person who's pretty quiet in a group space, think about whether there's an opportunity for you to share your perspective. And then generally, there is absolutely no way we can cover everything in 1 hour. So we will assume that we're not ever going to get through all of this stuff, except non-closure and say this is it. All right, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the legislative climate for LGBTQ young people right now. One of the things that I think has a lot of folks worried right now is some of these numbers around anti-LGBT bills in the United States. This is something that's been increasing over time over the past few years. We've seen this go up from like a couple hundred to almost doubling over the past few years. And I just show this map to give you a sense of sort of like how these numbers are rising, and sort of what kind of states are especially targeting LGBT people within the legislature. What's important to understand about this is that this data is up to date as of the 9th, I think, of April. But you see this big, scary number of bills that have been introduced. Introducing bills is the big tactic that we're seeing right now in different states. It does not mean that that legislation is passing. The vast majority is getting down. So I will share this with a grain of salt because I think this is a very sensitive perspective. And I'll talk a little bit more about why this is happening and sort of what the tactics are that our opposition is using. So a lot of the things that we're seeing right now particularly focus on curriculum censorship. So if we look at the kinds of bills that are being introduced nationally and also here in North Carolina, over half are targeting LGBTQ young people in school and LGBTQ representation in school systems. So a lot of these are really sort of focusing in on how do we sort of control what's happening with students. Curriculum censorship and forced outing mandates are talking about sort of limiting what you can talk about in the classroom, limiting sort of DEI, so diversity, equity, and inclusion in school systems, and bills like SB 49 in North Carolina that impact sort of how students are able to use different names and pronouns, and particularly target transgender students. We've also seen a lot of attacks on transgender athletes. That's part of a national strategy of the right to basically scapegoat transgender folks. And that's something that Jane talked about a little bit as well. It's this really coordinated national attack that's saying like trans people are scared, basically. And with that, we've also seen attacks on gender affirming care. So we had a bill that passed last year in North Carolina that limits the ability of minors to access hormone replacement therapy and other gender affirming care. And that is a trend that we're seeing nationally. We have seen the return of a few infamous bathroom bills, not here in North Carolina, but elsewhere. And those are limiting sort of people's abilities to access public facilities. We've also seen limits on gender marker updates, and sort of a new trend that we've seen in the past year are bills that attempt to sort of limit people's ability to do drag performances in public spaces and the ability of minors to attend drag performances, along with sort of coupled with prosecution for their performing drag, like classifying it as like a lewd performance. But we have not seen as much of that in North Carolina in the past few years, which is nice to see. But this is sort of the scope of what's been happening. And if y'all have questions about any of this stuff, feel free to jump in and I'm happy to talk through it. I want to go back to sort of like, you know, whenever I'm presenting bad news, I want to have some amount of optimism, because it sucks if all we focus on is all of the bad things that are happening. Some of the big trends that we're seeing right now are states and local communities that are bringing these bills and laws that have passed to the courts, saying this is illegal, can't treat people like this violates like X, protections of rights that we all have. And some of those efforts have been successful. So we've seen some trans athlete bans that have gone back to the court system in West Virginia. Saw a couple of wins there, and there's other cases that are happening nationally. So I share this to say that there are lots of different strategies for fighting some of these bills, and if they, you know, are not able to be overturned in the legislature before they pass, there is this opportunity to go through the court system that way. And that's something that we've actually seen a fair amount of success with. So that is exciting. And also all these people turning out in different places around the country to stand up for trans folks. So I want to talk a little bit about an update on SB 49. Does everybody know what SB 49 is? Some blank expressions. So SB 49 is a law that passed last year here in North Carolina. That is a curriculum censorship law. You might have heard it called what I don't say gay or trans bill. And it impacts K through 12 public and charter schools in North Carolina. It limits the ability of educators to talk about sexual education or gender identity for K through 4. And it also has a provision that impacts students who are trans by saying that you cannot go by a different name or pronoun without parental notification. So this is sort of being enforced in different ways in different school districts, sort of depending even up to the individual teacher. We've seen some classrooms put out a slip that goes to every student, and they have to get parental consent to whatever name or pronoun they're using at school. We've also seen this been enforced against nicknames. It's not necessarily impacting trans students. It's anybody who wants to go by something that's not on their legal documentation. And there's a lot of sort of oversight of any kind of materials that teachers are using in the classroom. So there are ways for bad actors in the community to put in complaints about teachers, put in complaints about the school district, and really tie up that whole district and sort of respond against. This is a tactic that we've seen used by groups like Moms for Liberty that are out there and really sort of focusing their energy on making it hard for public school teachers to their jobs and support students. That's like a really quick overview. There's some other stuff that is baked into there that's pretty annoying and frustrating. I think what's important to know about sort of what's happening right now is that enforcement began January 1st of this year. So we're still sort of trying to see this roll out. We've seen a lot of fear and anxiety from like parents, community members, things like that. And I think a lot of like school social workers and things like that are going to figure out how to respond. They don't want to out their students and put them at risk of being harmed at home.
So you don't have any data as far as the implications of this for the young people? Or do you have any data?
You can talk about sort of general mental health data. I have some of that in here. But as far as North Carolina, I think it's too early to have a ton. Our partners over the Campaign for Southern Equality have collected testimony from students, teachers, community members, and compiled that in a big report that's online. I believe the link is like Campaign for Southern Equality or something like that, but you can find it on their site. You have to share that as well. Yeah.
Just to share a little bit of information on how this went at high school. So it's really weird. My school has two sides of the spectrum. You have like the Christian nationalist crazy people, and then you dance. Like those are your two people. And then there are teachers on the Christian nationalist side, and then there are teachers on the gay side, and how it splits. One of the biggest teachers who I love his reaction is Mr. Doll. He's a study hall teacher, and a lot of kids go by different names on the top of the chart, and unfortunately, for like the first second semester of first day, he had to say the name that was on the charts. No one had time to get the slip in yet. So he said the names of those people in the weirdest way he possibly could. like yeah. So that no one could really tell the name other than the person that it was, so that no one could try to use that name against the kid later.
Oh, wow.
So that was really cute. There was a lot of kids trying to get together and have their parents sign it so their name would be something stupid. Overall,
Turned into
yeah, I ended up burning the paper they gave me. Just so there's definitely two sides to everything, and like there were some people that just didn't understand why it was a problem for people. They're like, why does it matter that like if you want to go buy anything, you don't have to get high? And I was like, because what if your parents don't know yet, and your parents don't like that, and that puts you in a dangerous situation? So it's a lot of just like, I don't live that experience, so like, how does that affect me? Is kind of where we're coming from on this. Like people want to help, they just don't get why we do that.
Yeah, and I think sort of what we hear on a regular basis, even from like rural counties, that teachers by and large want to support students. They're concerned about the well-being of their students. They maybe don't know what LGBT stands for. But you know, they have any district that you're in, any community, there are LGBT students. So it's not like a new thing, but it's sort of like, I think a lot of folks are sort of fumbling along and figuring out how to support their young people. We do see some bad actors that are like, you know, actively trying to enforce this in a way that harms students, and that can really make or break. One of the things I think that's a big concern for school staff is that some of the language in the bill includes there's like a sentence or two that says schools can discipline administrators and school staff if they don't follow the procedures that are laid out in this bill, but it doesn't include any information about how that is carried out. So I know that individual teachers are concerned about being fired, but we don't know of any districts that have actually taken retaliatory action against teachers, and we haven't seen any specific policies that lay that out. So that's something that we're still keeping an eye on. There's also an opportunity for the state to basically run an appeal against the district to say that the district is not carrying out the bill. So I'll talk about this in a second, but one school district, Chapel Hill Carver Schools, let me pull this up. Maybe that's separate, but Chapel Hill Carver Schools has basically said that they're not going to enforce any provision of SB 49 that negatively impacts LGBT students. They're trying not to raise a big fuss about it online and get attention from the State Department of Education. But one thing that we're watching there is to see, like, is the state of North Carolina going to come in with a stick and discipline that district? Sort of what's going to happen, or are they going to say that national protections of Title IX actually say that you cannot carry out a policy that discriminates against kids? So that's sort of like the big battleground that we're watching right now, is to see, like, is there a penalty for folks not doing this? Yeah,
That's something I wanted when I first, when I be wrong on the details, but all the conversation about this, not mistaken, part of it is if the teacher, like if the kid confides in a teacher, comes out or whatever, and then the teacher's supposed to then inform the parent, oh yeah, your kid's coming, they're gay, or that they might be questioning their gender or whatever. Like they're supposed to be obligated to do that. And then my understanding was if it's found out later that the teacher knew and didn't tell anybody, then they could be fired or whatever. But my first thought was like, how would they know?
You know, like, like the kid doesn't probably want the teacher to get in trouble either, so they probably wouldn't tell, you know, if it doesn't turn into a whole big thing, you know, like. It would require the kid to admit, well, I told Mr. Smith or whatever. And then even if they ask Mr. Smith, they'd be like, what are you talking about, you know?
Yeah, I think the main space.
It's unenforceable, you know?
Yeah, the main space is if we get angry parents.
Right.
Come back to trouble, which I think maybe has happened, but that's like. Yeah,
We have active parents that will go into the school and we have a, and Reagan loved that she had been able to get here. But her kid is in the film thing is in Monroe. And I was like, sorry, why did I do it on that same day? But you can't ever to figure out what is on a day that does whatever. And she's been working with campaign for Southern Equality in regards to the Title IX and trying to, and our Title IX person goes to a church that has online stuff that anti-homosexuality. So basically anything that we've sent her just sort of like goes into the shredder. And but like we've had the middle school teacher that was here yesterday also, they went into her room and videotaped and took pictures of anything that was a rainbow pride flag, because we do have a policy on flags. And they started going off to like, oh, you can't do any flags, but if you, a country can do this, and then they started realizing how convoluted that would be. But they do have it. And so now the Moms for Liberty, because they're attached to our PTAs will go in and videotape and then start causing problems about those teachers. And one good thing with her is that she was like, what are you gonna do? I'm just gonna leave it. And then it just sort of went away and she's living her life in her classroom. But not everyone's that way, because I've had other club sponsors that like another school where they the principal took away the Instagram
Yeah, that was associated with Chloe.
yeah, and just different things like that. It's like little bits and pieces all over the place, depending on, you know, and you can tell that the principal is super MAGA because of her Twitter. And that it's just, even in the more safe schools are not safe.
Yeah, I would love to, I talked to Craig a little bit about this before coming out, but I'd love to spend a little bit of time further on to think about like, what are the opportunities outside of schools when schools are fundamentally not safe and folks are not interested in enforcing protections for students? Because I know that depending on what school you're at in Union County.
Just this morning, we figured out that maybe Union County's email has been segregated, because I have all the high school emails and I've been sending them out. And I get certain ones that show that they've actively, you know, engaged. But like one of the club people, I sent directly to her and she never received it.
So there might be some blocking happening
Yeah.
potentially. Interesting. Yeah, so there's a lot of issues happening right now. And I think everybody here is experiencing them in different ways. I did have a note here about HB 574. This is one of the other bills that passed in North Carolina, which is an anti-transgender students support bill. It limits specifically trans female students from participating in school sports. We have seen some schools in Durham that have done a workaround for trans boys. And I think that's a way that some schools have been trying to do some advocacy. But this is the case in West Virginia that I mentioned that could potentially set a new precedent for North Carolina, where they overturned a similar bill in that court of appeals. In the circuit courts. So that's something that we're watching as well. Then the other thing to keep an eye on is that the Department of Education under Biden proposed changes to Title IX, which would ban any kind of categorical bans like trans sports bans in the school system. And those updates were intended to come out in October, but have been delayed, I think related to the election. So fingers crossed that that's sort of an additional layer to push states away from placing these kinds of categorical bans. Did you have a question or, sorry, you had your hand up a second. So I know we've talked about a lot of this already, but I want to open this up and ask folks, what do you see as the key issues impacting LGBTQ young people in your community? This can be inside or outside.
I think a lot of them want to be more involved, and they're struggling to find where they can be. And that could be in their own school, at themselves, or outside of school, where they can volunteer, where they can help. What's the best strategies going forward, basically. So that I'll talk with you like that.
I think a big thing with my school personally is finding a weekly fit. A lot of my friends, their parents are very anti-gay, and they don't even know how to get any to make them feel more comfortable with clothes. I don't know, other gender friendly parents. You don't even know what to do when they're older, because they want to. It's just.
I think when basic needs aren't being met for your mental health, it's hard to be like, okay, let's go fight the government. You know, it's like, I don't have a binder. I just want to sit in my room in the dark and cry. It's like, I don't want to go stand up in front of, the school board. Like, right. So it's kind of just like I'm just trying to survive, and all of you want me to save the world right now. And I kind of need help survive.
I don't know, and this is maybe just my perspective. I feel like, I think everyone knows that the attack against the trans community is pretty similar to the attack against anyone of color that LGBTQ. And it makes me angry because you're one of them. I would say in the trans community, y'all have the least amount of protection, I think. If that's the right thing to say, tell me I'm wrong. But like I feel like we want to build this cushion so that your youth isn't being terrorized by these people who are really trying to get to everybody, but they're holding y'all out front, and it's like the punching bag. Does that make sense?
Crazy, because the reason they're able to do it though is that they can have us be deemed as crazy. You don't have to listen to a crazy person. You don't have to listen to a person that's just mentally ill and just can't help mentally. You don't have to listen. So it comes from not necessarily, but like if you can deem a trans person as just someone who is mentally ill and just needs mental help and cannot think for themselves, and it has been indoctrinated or whatever, you don't have to listen. Which is the problem that I have in school all the time when I bring this stuff up, is like people just think I'm a crazy person. Like they don't think of me as like a person that's able to think and like have basic common sense and like look at the science of things. They think I'm just
I've heard people say like, oh, look at the higher rates of suicide and mental illness. That's because they need it's mental illness. They're looking at it like I'm like, no, you're looking at it wrong. The angle is that they have the mental illness from the trauma of not being allowed pretty much from birth to kind of like see themselves in the world, and all of that stuff builds up. Like I feel like it's not, they have mental illness, we need to fix them. It's they have mental illness because you won't let them just be themselves. Like I think everybody would be fine. Well, everybody, but mostly if everybody from the get-go could just be themselves. And a lot of the diagnosed, conditions people have are from the trauma of not being able to just be themselves in society or in their family.
Yeah, I think one of the things, and this is sort of an aside, but one of the things that we've been hearing as an organization we're involved in a lot of groups that do sort of political messaging training. And one of the things that's been coming out on a lot of that research is that the right is really winning on talking about trans people. They have this thing that are really scary. And that gets people into a place that they want to protect their kids because they want to protect their usually little white girls. That really gets people going.
So, Chloe,
but-
sorry to
Sorry.
interject, but I wanted to make sure that we have opportunity for people virtually to participate too, because Chloe brings up, my friends are scared to be themselves because they're afraid of bullying or being outed to families. So the rhetoric in Union County that paints the LGBTQIA+ community as predatory is a huge issue. Sorry to interrupt the flow.
Thank you for sharing that. I think the other thing that I was going to say is just like, one of the things that we are hearing is that one of the most effective ways to talk about trans kids and trans young people is talk about like, what are the ways that we all want to be seen and be treated, and every kid should have the right to have those experiences, especially trans kids. Like trans young people deserve to see themselves affirmed and see a future where they are happy and thriving, and get away a little bit from focusing so much on, are we talking about mental illness every single time we talk about trans youth, because that doesn't portray the whole experience of what it is to be trans. Yeah.
And this is what I was talking about earlier about being holistic. We really need to work, on for the disabilities swing of it is to remove that stigma of mental illness. And that goes into the trauma caused by, being gaslit and invalidated and targeted. So thank you. That's me, Pam. That's not Chloe.
Thanks for sharing that, Pam.
On the bullying, there was a whole thing with the debate club. I can go into that story later. It's a long one. But I was the only one on a side of the debate club in their affirmative care, or at least I thought. And then a week later, I was walking around in the hallway, and the person who was in that room was like, I was actually on your side. I was just afraid of everybody else that was screaming. So it really is, it's like, I understand that fear of like, oh my God, because like people do feel that. And that person was a straight, like she understood it, but like was scared of everybody else around her. So I think it is that fear of like, are these people going differently?
Yeah, and I think why we're seeing this stuff in the news so much too is not that people actually like hate trans people that much. It's because they tested this strategy that gets voters involved, which sucks because it's like, folks who meet a trans person like in day-to-day life are like, oh yeah, you're just like a person. Yeah, so I want to, people who are just trying to use the bathroom and live their lives, as we all do. But I want to transition a little bit here and talk about what happens when we see all this stuff on the news, when we see these conversations, especially for young people of adults in our state who are having these conversations about their rights and their ability to survive. It's using some really like nasty language. So one of the things that we often share in these conversations is talking a little bit, this is data about LGBTQ youth who wanted mental health care and services, but were unable to get it and cited these reasons. So, sorry, there's a lot of stuff on the screen. So on the left here, we say about 80% of LGBTQ young people had a desire to access mental health care. Only about 20% did not. But for folks who did want mental health care and weren't able to access it, they said the number one reason, which actually we see this from straight and cisgender kids as well, they're afraid to talk about their mental health concerns with someone else. We see this across the board. But we know that for LGBTQ youth, this risk is elevated because they may be talking about identity as well as talking about their mental health. The second one here is I did not want to have to get my parents' permission. The reason that is really key here as well is because we know that in schools with SB 49, there are additional constraints for folks to provide mental health care in a school setting without parental consent. And there's also concerns about folks like being outed in those spaces. So lots and lots of folks want to access this care, but experience additional barriers. And we're talking about some of this national legislation. It's got a really big impact on LGBT. So on this recent survey from the Trevor Project, this is a great place to get data if that's something that y'all are looking for, whether writing a paper or just sort of learning about what's happening. They actually also have a state breakdown for North Carolina that you can pull out. So nearly 1 in 3 LGBTQ young people this last year said that their mental health was poor most of the time or always due to anti-LGBTQ policies and legislation. And nearly 2 in 3 LGBTQ young people said that hearing about potential state or local laws banning people from talking about LGBTQ folks at school made their mental health a lot worse. So again, when we think back to that, basically the first slide that I showed y'all with that list of all those bills that have been introduced, even though those bills haven't been passed, hearing people talk about them every day has a big impact on LGBT young people. I know that it stresses me out on a regular basis. You know, I think this is kind of what we're hearing from a lot of folks. But one thing that we want to be thinking about is that how are we offering like community care and support for folks who have this additional level of stress and anxiety because of these conversations that are happening. And I talked a little bit about, oh my gosh, so many tabs, anti-LGBTQ rhetoric, and particularly relating to like anti-activism. But we're in this space right now where there's this incredible wave of hate and demonization targeting LGBTQ people, often way beyond what we're seeing in day-to-day life. At least for me, I don't know you all, but really, really nasty stuff online, especially in Twitter, X, and Facebook. And a lot of times what's happening is that folks are running for office, running for local power in some way. Maybe they want to be their local influencer by spreading some of this stuff. They're sharing a bunch of this stuff to get people agitated. And that is a strategy to engage with community members. You're firing people up and you're creating an in-group for people who are. And this is concerning for a lot of ways. First and foremost, because some of this hatred online is moving offline. So some of these conversations that are happening, I'm sure y'all have experienced this, that are coming into people's everyday lives. They're being repeated by young people in schools, and they're dangerous. They're impacting folks' ability to feel safe spaces. I know that we've seen a big rise in like digital attacks like doxing, like forced outing online, things like that, ways that folks are using the internet to create unsafe spaces for people in real day-to-day life. So I mentioned that as sort of a newer trend that we're seeing that is really impacting, especially the way that young people are experiencing the world. And I think pretty much everybody has heard about Benedict and sort of what happened in their school and the experiences that they were having before their death. And I think that the reason that we have been talking about next, well, many different reasons, but one of the things that Nicole, the executive director of Freedom Oklahoma, shared is that people have continued to ask me what I need. The hardest thing is trying to articulate that what I need most is for not one more trans Oklahoman to die. What I need is for folks to put their energy into doing something here where it's hardest. What I need is for folks to see that our community is strong and resilient, even though that's a word I never want to have to use, because we shouldn't have to be those things to survive. And I think this really reflects what a lot of folks are feeling, is that there's this like huge power in community, but it sucks to have to be resilient all the time. It sucks to have to like move through all these moments that are challenging, and it's just exhausting to see young people die by suicide, to see other deaths, and sort of continued attacks. So I think a lot of people are coming from kind of a low point right now, and what I really want to encourage folks to think about is how do we move from thinking about getting through the day-to-day and start thinking about a better. So one of the things that we've been talking a lot about with queer and transgender young people is, you know, like you mentioned, you can't organize when you're you're trying to get through the day to day. A lot of LGBTQ young people want to just hang out with their friends and go home, and like maybe they want to play on a sports team. Maybe they want to live a really boring life and like read manga online and like people just want to. I know, but like you don't have to want to like change the world. You don't have to want to like have this like crazy exciting life and be famous. You just want to like have a normal life, do it every day, and be okay. You don't even have to like be like thriving. You just want to have an okay time. So one of the things that we've been thinking about as an organization is like, how do we envision a future where LGBTQ young people can thrive, can have a normal life and an expectation of a long future, and not sort of be limited by this timeline. Like, I just have. So I want to ask you all, maybe ignore the slower question. What does a future where trans create or thrive?
It almost become more invisible because the fact that it's so difficult is what makes it visible for us. It would just be normal, so you would almost kind of like ignore it that it's happening.
Leave me alone. I just don't want lawmakers talking about me and my family. Leave me alone.
That's, yeah, like you said a minute ago, like regular part of life, like, my uncle's on his third wife and my cousin is, single and just stuff with a kid and, my trans cousin is married to, like, it's just, this is the thing, like, it's not something that warrants like attention, it's just, I just different, it's like the 10th thing you say and you listen and get your haircut. Right, yeah, it's like, you could just name things about people that's just one on the list, it's not even a big deal.
I think what's interesting too is to hear you say, I just wanted to leave me alone. I don't want to hear about my family or me or my family being talked about on the news. It was exactly the same thing I was experiencing when I was 14, 15, 16 years old, back in the village state when the brat days, when all they would do was say homosexual or hateful, they're going to die of drug addiction, and they're going to be lonely and corrupt and they're suicidal. I mean, they planned everything out for us, so we're like, okay, well, let's just do it. I mean, it was like that kind of feeling. So to hear you say the exact words, because I remember having that conversation before my parents threw me out. What do you want? I just said, there's no to be left alone. That's exactly what I said. I want to hear about people talking. I remember sitting when I was 15 years old, I believe, Oklahoma, places, sitting there watching TV, and my mom, and there was something gay going on, rally or something, and my mom said, I hate homosexuals because they recruit. And I remember hearing that in my mind all my life. And when Ellen did the thing about I got my chips thrown, it just like that was one of those moments where I just went, that is so fucking stupid. This is so freaking stupid, it's interesting to hear your point was spot on when you said really day-to-day life. I don't hear anything. No one at work bothers me, no one says anything disparaging, but then there's this little vocal few that have chosen the trans community as their punching bag. And I hate hearing that in Monroe, they're like, oh, I really don't have problem with gays. But, right, which just negates everything they just said.
Talking about whether I have a problem with,
Yeah.
a problem with.
There's levels, and then there's levels. I always think it's very different. But in my head, it's like scared of racism because I'm like, there are people who are like, yeah, no, gay people don't care. But what if your kid did? How would you? Or what if you met somebody and y'all were really good friends, and then once into your relationship, they told you they were gay? Like, you could say you don't care, but you do, and then you talk about like, oh, I'm racist sometimes. What if your kid married a leopard? Or what if, you know what I mean? Like, then they realize, well, that's different. No, it's not. It's not. Like, how do you feel?
Saying that's also presenting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Like, so people think that they're not homophobic or racist or whatever. It's like, yeah, maybe you're not as that as it was in the past, where people would just say whatever, but you're just hiding. You just squashed it in a little bit. It's still there.
Yeah, I would rather have an enemy that I love.
Yeah. Yeah.
Than to have one who's like, well, I just love you and have a neighbor doing that. So
Yeah. Or
they're get out of the house a decade, and
Right.
you know, but they're cool with their gay coworkers, you know, so it's like, you can't pick and choose.
Actually, it's a practically friends and gay. And it's like, I had friends and everything, and then her oldest daughter, you know, was lesbian. And she kept, sort of like kicked her out of the house, really house with the family. And my mom and her stopped being friends over that. And because my mom was like, what are you doing? And, but she was like all out for everything else.
Yeah, it's okay when it's out.
Yeah.
Like, you know, other people out there.
And you didn't realize that the shit kicking daughter that was wearing boots and jeans.
Yeah, all the time.
She put that on sign.
Not stand up for shitty people. Well, stand up for shitty people. My mom, the first time I came,
She was like, give speech about it.
Yeah.
I've heard her talk.
so, I was by Amazon the first time I came up because I put a binder in the Amazon cart and then my mom tapped it. Which don't buy binders off Amazon later. But you do weird things when you're running out of things. I was in the car with my mom and she asked me if I was a lesbian, which first of all, I've been a
What's that to do with?
yeah. But whatever. And I told her I was trans, and her response was, "You can be a lesbian, but this trans thing is not exactly like what you thought I was a lesbian."
So she had already accepted that.
Yeah, she had already accepted that, and her roommate in college was a lesbian, like all the, but she had never been around a trans person else out of a trans person and like done it, and like she was okay with it in theory, but then as soon as it was her kid, it's a person in her life, it's weird. And now my mom's fine. I mean, you heard this.
Yeah, so now she's giving speeches at people out of it.
Yeah, so, and she's great, I love her, but it took a year of me pretending to be a lesbian for her to finally be okay with the trans thing. And so not to stick up for shitty people are shitty.
They can learn.
But remember, oftentimes they're not shitty because they're just shitty people, it's the fact that they don't know enough, so they're scared.
And when it's your kid,
Yeah.
and say, part of it's fear, but then you can be fine with everybody in the world, but then you're like, I don't want my kid to be bullied or harassed or have to fight the government, or, you know, if the government goes to the left or the right, you know, or are they gonna get her in jail or whatever, you know, like, you know, rationally you can't change it. You can't say, "Come on, don't do this."
Yeah.
Just give up. But at the same time, you're like, I'm sure, but then it's gonna be, you know, like, just what you think about it.
So I guess to sort of, no, I'm actually, I appreciate that point, and I think maybe the question that I would pose back to y'all is like, what happens in order for us to get there? Where folks are able to have those conversations, like what was different?
From a mental health standpoint, you know, living with an undiagnosed mental illness for about 4 decades, I think getting to that point it's all about stigma, breaking stigma first within ourselves in order to tell our stories, and then second, to just have normal conversations, just like the hair salon, you know, just bring these things up in normal conversation, be able to say these words, and use the language. And I think that's the thing. I think the language is scary. Labels are scary, and especially if you don't know what they mean. So that's in order to know that.
But I'm hearing you need a PR team.
Can we make a gay PR team? I think that would be awesome.
Yeah, because that's it, with education, you know, I think
Changing
the more people that have millions or some people, well, they want to be educated, but you know,
You're right.
intermingling with people and meeting, you know,
like finding out, like, oh, you know people with community, you don't think you do, but you do, you know, and then you're like, oh, see, they're not trying to, you know, control, they're not too fast.
I think it's hard to be queer youth now more than in the 80s and 90s, because there really wasn't anybody on TV, there wasn't anybody that was like, we have politicians, we have Hollywood. I mean, I remember I was an adult with Hollywood, and it was a big friggin' deal. And so,
No, like that wasn't a thing y'all knew.
listen, I read it.
He was like, we knew.
She wrote a book and said in her book, because I remember reading it before she came out. Somewhere in the book, she said something like, everybody thinks I'm lesbian. I asked me all the time, I'm lesbian. No, I'm not lesbian. And I remember reading it going, oh. And then a few years later, she came out publicly, and first thing I thought of was like, you know, you gotta date your book.
she keeps saying I'm like, well,
She,
but yeah, she was telling people that she liked them until she actually, and then her showing off. So
she might have not committed to herself yet, to a certain point, you know.
at least had this idea that there was not a safe place, except a couple of places in America that you can live openly. as your
Or
person.
San Francisco, maybe not.
And, but now you get all of these RuPaul, and everyone, you know, gets to a certain level that it's like, oh, I'm LGBT, and then you get to the middle America, we're not really middle, but local America, where you're not safe in your own school rooms and stuff. At least back when I was in school, you just didn't say anything, and then when you went back to your meeting, you're like, that's what you want to look like each other. Yeah.
I think the comparison between now and then is kind of comparing apples to oranges.
Yeah.
Y'all were dealing with different shit than you were, right? I mean, you were just trying to get married, and now we're trying to be able to get the proper drugs. So it's different in a way, and I mean, I think that the representation is great, but I also think the fact that if one person says something, like if one trans person does something, if one gay person does something wrong, suddenly that becomes every gay person and every trans person. You know,
Like, see, they're all.
yeah, see, look, they're all like, no, that's not it. Believe it or not, we're all different people. We're not a hive. But so I think the representation is great, and it's awesome. And I'm not gonna say I had to watch Heartstopper 4 times in a row, but
Say it hopefully to work.
it is good. It's some of the best representation I've seen come from a straight person with her, which is pretty awesome.
I need to read the book on it.
Yeah. So yeah, it's at the end of the day, comparing the two doesn't make either of the two bad. You know,
I was gonna like step in because like for me, like I didn't have the language for things that I was thinking. And so, I mean, I look back at all the things I missed out on because I didn't even have that chance. And I don't want that for you guys coming up. But that's like,
That be the commonality that you do have, because I remember sneaking into the library to find anything. I figured that was me. Most of it was very negative. But every once in a while you find something, you know, and I think I remember when it was just L and G, and they added the B and they added the C.
Yeah, seeing her stuff, it's like Googling.
yeah, yeah.
I don't know what it's like to want to be female. So why do I have to be put in with trans people? But then as I started to learn more about the trans community, the more and more I was like, absolutely, apples and oranges. Yeah. But yet we fall under this same umbrella where a lot of our experiences, where no matter where you are in life, there's some commonality. And I think that's what the light bulb for me, maybe it's a dim bulb. You know, that's when I went, okay, now I get it.
And also the fact that the LG, like, trans people created Stonewall, like, they were at the forefront of things, and then a whole bunch of people came in and tried to take away trans history, and then we got the two.
There's that movie.
Give you a master class.
Yeah.
It's all about gender, really, because I think, not maybe for like gay people, it's not about gender, it's sexuality, but like,
No,
but the people that, right, but I don't think that, but you tend to stereotype, but usually the reason people that are homophobic have a problem with it is because the different, like, you know, gender stuff freaks them out or whatever, and it's like, so to them, it's all the same, you know, but we can see the difference, yeah. Right,
They have
exactly.
family separate.
Yeah.
So it's just that story of people with privilege thinking anybody trying to make it fair is an attack on them.
Yeah,
And
if you're not acting the way we expect you to act, then I don't have explosion, like, I don't know what to do with that, you know?
I think that's why it's take away yours.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we just have about 15 minutes left. And I want to make sure that we're talking about the stuff that's like most useful to y'all. I love like how much knowledge folks have in the room and what folks have been able to share with each other so far. And I think that's like the most important thing that y'all can be doing with this time. But I do want to ask for both folks on Zoom and folks in the room, do you have any questions that you'd like to dive in more, either that I can answer or that we can talk about as a group? And if not, I would love to talk a little bit more about like how do we move forward specifically in Union County and sort of what are y'all's ideas. There's a ton more information in this presentation about SB 49 specifically. So if that's something that y'all are interested in, Crystal, if you're comfortable sharing the slides with folks, I'd love to make those available to everybody. And we're also available to like connect with folks one-on-one after today, both us and our partners over at the Campaign for Southern Equality to work with y'all on sort of some of the stuff that you're interested in. So that was a ton of information. Do y'all have any questions?
Do you guys like, go and set up clubs? Do you have like places where people volunteer? How can people get involved to help change the narrative, and change things?
Yeah, so I'll take this. I just heard someone online say something, but I'll take this in-person question and then come back over to you. Yeah, so in terms of what Equality NC offers, we are a statewide organization, but primarily we have folks in Charlotte and the Raleigh-Durham area right now. So in terms of like coming out in person, sort of around those regions, places that we're most active, but we will do like online support with folks anywhere in the state. In terms of setting up clubs, there is a statewide GSA network support led by Youth Outright in Western North Carolina. So they've got great resources for folks who are interested in setting up clubs, and I can connect y'all to the folks there. Back into the primary contact who does that work, and we'll also like Zoom and GSAs. Also, Time Out Youth in Charlotte is probably going to be the most local resource to you all outside of yeah, we're happy to like troubleshoot. We're a really small team, but we're happy to like figure out how we can best be involved with folks. Did I answer all of your questions? Okay. I couldn't remember if there was a second part on there. So I'll come over. Did someone on Zoom have a question?
Yeah, you were talking about what the other side does on social media. And I belong to a lot of groups that work on more in the progressive realm of things. But I don't know if there's anything specifically for LGBTQIA specific and also for trans youth where we share memes or share hashtags. Are there places to go for where people are propagating memes and hashtags and messaging?
I will say there are some, most of them are Discords, however, I don't know why we decided Discord was the place, but Discord is the place.
Well, we need a place. We need a place to share them, like on Facebook and X and I can't believe I just said X and not Twitter. Facebook and Twitter and other places like that. So because they make actual memes, or has like, for an example, one of the ones that's coming up is Justice Can't Wait, because we think that that SCOTUS is going to drag their feet on some decisions. So a lot of us are going to start hashtagging Justice Can Wait. Is there some, I know that there's places for LGBTQIA plus to meet, like on Discord and stuff, but how about places to help us promote a message?
Yeah, I mean, I think any of the national orgs like pretty regularly run hashtag campaigns. I think if we're talking about sort of where the community is, if you're looking at Facebook, that's going to be folks who are over 40 mostly. Twitter leans old, older as well. I think youth communities we see primarily on Discord and Instagram. So it's also sort of, yeah, TikTok, but like depends on the community that you're trying to reach and engage with. I think that we look to like the Trevor Project, GLSEN, GLSEN, both do work specifically around LGBTQ youth. Those are places to look on in terms of like social media stuff that you can like really easily reshare. And I'll get rid of impacts.
I will say there are some troubles with the algorithm in some apps though, because if you interact with like a pro LGBTQ thing, I think they're all grouped together. So pro LGBTQ stuff and anti are like grouped together.
Yeah.
So if you interact with pro stuff, then you're gonna get the anti stuff. So it keeps us from reacting to the pro stuff because we don't want to get the anti stuff on the feed and it makes us feel bad. Blah blah blah.
They all have the hashtag.
Yeah.
Yeah. I know that Equality North Carolina will send out email once a month on different things to push out into your Facebook or whatever too. So if you get on there, I don't know if it's on some sort of subscription area, but I do get those, and we can send out those kinds of things. And so maybe signing up for the subscriptions of those different organizations, you might get them, and then you can push those out to your sphere of influence, and maybe they'll send it out, things like that.
Right.
And I'll get you a listing of different ones, of different places, and like ours, we do, you know, especially for awareness days, we do certain things on our social media, and then just share those as well. So.
Yeah, I think there's lots of good stuff in existence out there. It's just a matter of like getting plugged in with the right groups. We also have like a website that's got a big list of resources on our Notion page, and that also has information about all of these bills that we've been talking about. So I'll send that over to Crystal.
I think what I'm trying to say is the focus on relational organizing. It is a way of organizing. If you wanted to do things with social out in social media stratosphere, because you were talking about how concerted an effort the other side has. We need to consider how we can have a similar, presence. That is there some, I'm sorry, I went off on a dead end. Just having a place that shows organizing. It doesn't seem like organizing, it's sharing memes, but it is, or sharing hashtags, but it is.
Yeah, one group that I think has done a really good job of that with folks around North Carolina is Public School Strong, and we've done some work with them. They've done some great work to try to combat the like Moms for Liberty presence outside of schools. What's it called? Public School Strong.
I can get you the information on that too. Yeah, I'm sorry. I just wanted to let you know that I'm plugged in with them.
Already are all up to date. Yeah. I mean, I think like what you're saying makes sense. And one of the number one things that I think folks have done to help me, my mom has been a huge advocate, and she loves Facebook. That's like the number one place that she posts every single thought out of her head. But like over the years, since I came out when I was like 13, and my mom since then has been so active with her community of like primarily straight older folks of talking about me and sort of the different things that she's experienced in her process of sort of coming to terms with my identity and being an advocate. She's helped a lot of other parents like figure out what to do when their kids come out. And I think that has been amazing. And I cannot overstate how much of a difference it's made in my day-to-day life. And I'm from Apex, North Carolina, and just like the climate there has changed so much. And it's because of her and folks like her who are having these conversations with folks. Like there's all these like really engaged moms and dads suddenly in Apex, North Carolina that have put together a whole Pride festival. So it's been really sweet to see. And I think that's like sort of a success story. So we have about 10 minutes. If folks have any other questions or yeah.
So going back to the social media and minors, we've had the conversation where there's a safety issue where if we even look like we're trying to approach them about anything, all of our baggage will get dragged into their world.
We're recruiting, whoever's.
And all the bad people that follow us are gonna find them. We had the problem with our team event last year. The protesters showed up. We were lucky where we headed. We were able to keep them relatively far away. But even driving in, you still saw, you know, those signs and the throws. But I don't know if there's like a specific like strategy to just have that avenue of conversation that communicate with them and keep them safe away from the worst of what we have to deal with.
I think it's training actual children to do the thing. So instead of you guys running the thing, it's actually a kid doing it. So it doesn't look like you guys are making us do anything. I like how they do it.
That's been talked about too.
Yeah, so like just
We have a Discord, but what happens is they keep graduating.
Yeah.
Keep getting older. Yeah, and so we'll get people to do something one year and then the next year they're gone.
Yeah.
And so, we need them younger. Because I can't start recruiting when they're taking sixth grade. Ninth grade, 10th grade.
This sounds like we're sorted.
Ninth and 10th grade so that they can train, you know, as they get to 11th and 12th, then they can train the 9th and 10th. And that's one thing that, we will get a grouping of kids in different schools and then they graduate. And then, and I've seen this also with clubs, is that a really good club will get together and then they graduate. And then there's no younger ones to keep moving up. And so
I think a mentorship program would be a good idea. That's a good idea.
I would love that because that's like Rotary back home had a mentorship program and that, you know, so if you could be like a kid that's wanting to be a nursing, then you have, you know, a kid that wants to be in social work, or a kid that's crazy and wants to be an attorney, you know, and I would love that. And we have the Discord, and the Discord used to have people that there is a Discord of Union County, it's Union County Clears, I think it is. And it started during like COVID, and it had 125 kids at one time in it. But many of them moved off. Also, for a while, there was one that was controlling and saying that, oh, we can't put this on or that on. So I had Union County Pride had people that were in that Union County Discord. But I don't even know if it's still around this year because none of the people that I know is in that. And but even like Toy will send out stuff to Union County students. And I do also think that teens are in so much stuff. I don't know when they sleep anymore. Because I was like a go-getter, like nerdy,
and band, RPC. I went to the science fair, you know, that kind of stuff. The state and the science fair, and I was, you know, really busy, but then I hear what they're having to do today, and I'm like, I was a slacker at those two. And
What? You don't even want to know what I was. What you-
um, and I think that's another thing that's just trying to get um ability for them to have time to.
Yeah, I think those are two of the hardest things in youth organizing. Uh, I have been following this organization called the Georgia Youth Justice Coalition, and they've been doing some really amazing work. I think the number one thing that folks can be doing is actually paying folks for their time. I know that that's not necessarily like a helpful solution for a small community organization, but we have found the very best way to get young people to show up is to offer some kind of compensation, which is also respectful when we know that young people are like doing a lot of different things. So we've been experimenting with that at Equality NC with our youth fellowship program. And that's been really awesome to get have folks who are like, yes, I've blocked out this amount of time for this like a job, because it is a job. And the other thing that I would say is just, I think mentorship programs are awesome. Other ways that you can help younger folks get involved in a way that doesn't feel as scary, but also giving them some sort of like substantive role so they feel like a real part of the group and have something that can contribute with. And I'm happy to like brainstorm more with folks. I found, I also follow the Future Coalition. That's a really great org that's doing like really youth-led organizing. So looking to some of those folks as models for how to design this type of community stuff. But it can be harder in a space where people are more spread out and there's not as much like opportunity for engagement or going directly to school.
Talk to me after this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, happy to continue. I'm about out of time here, but so I want to give folks some time to take a break. But if anybody wants to get in touch with me, I will share, I'll talk to Crystal about sharing out my information. And I'm happy to like continue the conversation. But thank y'all so much for jumping in and being so willing to participate. It's always awesome for me to like have other people be willing to talk back to me. So I loved it. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Give a 10-minute potty break, and I'll get the next person up. And before you ask them, Amy, the communication manager, and you're the youth manager or director. And everything. How's it going?
To make the connection.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
I've been paged in.
Okay.
If you will just take this when you're finished and just slide it under here.
Perfect.
And then I will because I could borrow that from Brenda, who's the manager in the ER.
Okay.
So that's why I can tell her to pick it up. So,
Okay.
Well, but yeah, and then just if y'all want to type get over to the receptionist and they can put it in a break room, so whichever you want to do. They're not expecting it.
But yeah.
That's what I did last time. If you don't want to lug it up.
I know the night nurses will eat.
They'll eat anything.
There's here's the clinic, so the nurses and everybody comes into the same break room and then puts a lot of. Thank you so much for coming.
Taking the sun and just pressed it out and submitting it.
actually bring him.
Not immediately.
Pamela,
Yes, ma'am.
we're gonna have to stop the recording during this time because of the slides can't be on recorded
Okay,
for the next step. Okay,
okay. And it's,
What- could we
You'll-
just not do? We could do this, without sharing.
Yeah, parental rights don't.
stop the recording being streamed.
We could do this stop recording, but it will still, I would like the words, but not the slide. Oh, we could still record it, but not put the slide up and just do the voice recording on this section. But we can stop it here, turn back, and just have this one section being recorded separately. So why don't we
Want to do it? You just tell me what you need from me.
stop the recording? And then hopefully we can record it again and I can just do the voice recording.
You can pause the recording.
Can I not stop it? Stop it?
You can stop it, stop it. I thought you wanted to start it again. That's why